In 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on that now famous case of Brown versus the Board of Education. In that ruling, a unanimous court stated that segregation in public schools was unconstitutional. In 1955, they added that all schools must be desegregated with deliberate speed. When the Supreme Court decision was handed down in 1954, Montgomery County, like other jurisdictions, had to plan for integration. Rose Kramer was on the county's Board of Education at the time. She remembers her reaction to the Supreme Court decision like it was yesterday.
Well, I was elated because by that time I was so aware of how uneven our school system was in Montgomery County. How so inferior our black schools as a whole were in relation to the white schools, how truly segregated we were, in that even the white and black teachers didn't participate in many of the things that were to better teachers.
How did the rest of the school board react?
I think either indifferent or hoping that it would go away. Not all. There was no effort on their part to say, oh, this is an opportunity. And rather surprised me, very honestly, because I thought in my own mind this was a great opportunity, both for the good of the children and from the standpoint of the whole physical plant of the schools of Montgomery County.
How did MCPS move from resisting desegregation to implementing desegregation?
Not easily. The interesting thing was that when I, as the leader in this on the school board, kept persisting, when are we going to get to this? We did the usual thing of having a study commission. That took a year. The study commission came up with, it doesn't look like a problem. Remember, Montgomery County only had 7% blacks in the whole county. The school board said, well, let's have kindergarten integrated, and then we'll study it a year. We'll do it for a year, and then we'll study it for a year. So I, trying to make them look ridiculous, said that means it will take us 24 years to desegregate the Montgomery County school system, which did make them look a little foolish. And so we then began doing several grades at a time with always my prodding them with the law says. The law says you must do this.
The advisory committee, created to study integration issues, was made up of leaders in the white and African American communities. They pored over countless letters and heard hours of testimony on the subject. There were people who wanted to proceed, but most were wary of this thing that had never been done before. Others were against the idea altogether.
They accumulated people on their side who talked about social engineering. We were doing social engineering, and I remember that expression. And that time would take care of these things, and that we mustn't go, all the usual, because they couldn't deny the law was on our side. By the way, there were such things as threats, midnight calls in my house. How dare you do this? You're the leader, you're the troublemaker. But that's really what leadership is all about. When you are sure that what you're attempting to achieve has backing of other people, is right, it really, you can take it,
Public school integration in Montgomery County began at the start of the 1955-56 school year. It is said that the process went smoothly, and compared to school districts in other parts of the country, this is true. It wasn't, however, a transition without challenges. The first step began in the 55-56 school year. At that time, 5 African American teachers were transferred out of substandard schools to all-white schools. One of those teachers was Allison Claggett, who describes how they prepared.
We had committees. We met with the superintendent. We met with the different, we call them integration committees. And we would discuss different methods of working with kids and working with parents. And people would ask me, he said, Allison, how do you mind teaching white kids. And my answer was, it doesn't make any difference to me. I like to teach kids and I love children. And all I need for them to do is to come to school with an attitude that they want to learn, and they will be taught.
As plans were made to close the Down County colored schools, parents at Rollingwood Elementary expressed the most vocal opposition.
Some of them said behind the scenes they didn't want their children to go to school with their maids' children. And they weren't going to have it. And, they said many, many mean things in those letters.
As the 56-57 school year began, up-county schools were included in the integration plan. There, African Americans could request that their children be transferred to certain schools. George Barnes was one of the children whose transfer was approved. On September 4th, 1956, he arrived for his first day.
First day at Poolesville Junior Senior High School is memorable, stay in my mind forever, very vividly. I arrived at school on a bus that picked me up. My parents put me on the bus and then they followed in a car. There was a police officer on the bus. Police officer there, I guess for my safety, since I was the only African American on the bus. So the police officer rode the bus. I got to school. Got with some other kids who came from other areas here around Poolesville, Jerusalem, Big Woods Road, and we got together. The front door, or there was a mob, I'll say a mob of people. You would say mass or congregation in other situations. This was a mob. And they were there to bar the black students from entering school and registering as a student. A gentleman who had come to Poolesville as principal at the time, a guy named Crawford, Mr. Crawford, got together with the parents and the students outside the area, and it was away from the crowd, and said, well, come with me. We're going to go around to the back of the school, and we're going to come in that way, Mm-hmm. And it was through the back entrance we came in and registered and started school. That was the first day.
One of the teachers at Poolesville that same year was Representative Connie Morella. She recalls the racial tension vividly.
Not only did the African American students have to put up with the protests, but I'm sure it was no fun having lunch in the cafeteria, because this is where the students, particularly the older students, would band together, sit together, and make remarks. Make remarks sometimes just to be part of the crowd, to, voguish kind of thing, when we can't possibly show that we would like to sit with them or we think they're nice people. So the students had to put up with notes being passed to them too, where they were insulted. They had to put up with papers that I read, and I'm sure that they saw or heard about, which indicated that they were inferior, that they should not be together with the white students.
The hostility wasn't limited to inside of school.
Every night for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, there were just a multitude of the line of cars, a parade that came past my home, people threw trash, all types of things, fecal matter from animals and whatnot in the yard. I remember those things distinctly. Cleaning up the yard in the morning before I went to school.
Bobby Israel also began at an integrated school in '56. He entered 5th grade at West Rockville, which is today Bell Elementary.
Initially, I really didn't make any friends, but the mayor of Rockville at that time was a man named Alexander Green, and his son became my first friend. And by the end of the school year, I made friends that I just saw at our 35th high school reunion recently, and we're still friends. But there were many, many fights, many kids who didn't really want to touch us. There were days in the 2 years that I attended here that I remember once about 30 white kids chasing a friend of ours right down this street to my house, which is right on North Washington Street. We were called all sorts of names. So although I did make some friends, there are probably some children that didn't want me there then, and we're still not friends until this day.
Bobby Israel graduated from Richard Montgomery in 1965.
You really have to keep in mind that the neighborhoods were still segregated. So there really wasn't that much opportunity for us to play after school unless you traveled to somebody's house. So integration in school was fine into high school. The sports teams were integrated and all that sort of thing. But social integration was not there by 1965.
Not everyone was hostile. In fact, most weren't. Bill Thomas was a junior when integration came to Sherwood High School in 1957.
I wondered what was going to happen. I wondered whether there would be any kind of rebellion on the part of the white students. To the best of my recollection, there was none of any significance. The fact that our opinion or our feelings about black children were different was something that it was very important that when we as students began to realize that these kids were just like us, at least that's my sense, is that they were students, they were my age, they were my gender, the feelings that I had. And I may be oversimplifying it, I'll be honest, but to the best of my recollection, it was good.
Here at Gaithersburg High School, integration began in '58 when John McGraw was a senior.
I would describe my own feeling as one of being curious because I had very little relationship with African Americans, so I was curious to see how it goes. I made friends there in the small group of African Americans that we had. I became pretty good friends with a student named Tom Prather, and we had classes together. And I don't think I really realized it at the time, but it certainly increased my awareness of how other people lived and how black Americans were living.
Some African American students had an easier time. Friends since childhood, Anita Summerhour and Rentha Butler, moved to Broome Junior High in 1958. They credit their elementary teacher at Rock Terrace for the easy transition.
We had the same teacher in the 5th and 6th grades, Gladys Boston, yes. And she prepared us for it, and she prepared us for it because she talked to the children that had gone to integrated schools before we had and about the problems they had, any problems that they had. And from the problems that they had, she knew what she had to do with us, and she did it in 2 years. We were well prepared when we came into an integrated school. I thought it was scary just going from elementary to junior high.
Well, if you remember, though, a lot of us were separated. We didn't see each other until gym or lunch, because the ones that were really pretty bright, I'm not saying I was all that bright, they kept us separated. Like I had English by myself, I had geography by myself, I may have had math or something with you, but we didn't get to see each other until gym. Now, what settled my nerves was I met a girl in class, and she was very nice to me, so I kind of relaxed, but it was very scary. Not seeing your friends all day, I mean, except twice.
There were probably some white kids that were just as afraid as we were.
True.
And, maybe we were drawn to each other.
In the end, the school board maintained that integration would proceed, but sometimes it was not without a fight.
One morning when I went in class, the other African American student who was in class with me, and we supported each other, didn't come to school that day. So I was left alone there in the class. The students, several of which were pretty big guys, proceeded to lock the teacher in the closet. They locked the teacher in the closet and came over to me and said, "Now you're going to get what you've been asking for." Okay. I decided this day that I really feared for my life, and I felt that if I didn't fight back to the best of my ability, that I was going to be in real trouble. So the guy came over to me and pushed me, and I fell out of the desk. He turned the desk over. When I got up, we tussled for a little bit, and I don't know what, I didn't hit him with anything. I hit the guy, and he went down, and I just went on him, and when somebody pulled me off of him, some people came in and took over the class and got everybody settled, what have you. But that guy, and I remember his name, but that's not important, he never returned to school, and I think that was a turning point for us. I don't relish the fact that I had to do this, and I don't believe that if you talk about character building that this was an integral part, but I think it was absolutely necessary. If I had to do it again, I don't know. I think if the people today had an opportunity to go back and change things and be a little more accommodating from 1956, they probably would, because I don't think that they would want this type of legacy.
By 1961, Montgomery County public schools were considered fully integrated. All children went to their neighborhood schools. Not all neighborhoods were integrated, neither were all schools. The way MCPS addressed this was to assign one African American teacher to each of the remaining all-white schools. But the effort to address racial balance didn't stop there. Councilmember Blair Ewing served on the school board from 1976 to 1998. He believes that's when the real challenges began.
From the time of the Brown decision until the mid-70s, the impact on Montgomery County of desegregation was very real, and it came rather slowly, but it wasn't major because the proportion of the population that was African American and other minorities totaled only 12% of the student population in the county. But things began to change in the late 60s, early 70s, when one school in particular, Rosemary Hills Elementary, became a majority African American school. And that was of concern to people of goodwill because they felt that that was resegregation and that we ought to take steps to see what we could do to remedy that situation there.
A busing program was implemented to better integrate county schools. Later, magnet programs were instituted to draw students and achieve racial balance in ethnically diverse areas. And a transfer policy was adopted to help schools more closely reflect their community, which was recently overturned.
One doesn't want to deliberately create schools that have that concentration of one group, one class. That, it seems to me, is an unfortunate result of housing patterns when that occurs. And it has occurred in some schools. But on the whole, the board's efforts, I think, have had a degree of success in maintaining racially and ethnically diverse neighborhoods that are more integrated than many in the country as a whole, and more successful in that regard than many.
Now at the beginning of the 21st century, enrollment in the county's public schools is reported to be less than 50% white. While this is a dramatic change from the days of segregation, there is still a lot of work to do.
Obviously, things are a world of betterment or a world of improvement. Are there things to do? Absolutely. And the thing that is, I think, the biggest reality is to know that there's still some folks that are unhappy.
Black children don't appreciate what went on before they came. You know, they take education for granted. We did not. They don't understand what we had to go through, not us so much, but our forefathers, to even get to this point. They just take it for granted. It's no big deal to them. They don't want to read, they don't want to know the history, they don't want to know anything. And it's not just them, it's the white kids too. Mm-hmm. The cultures have intermixed, and the worst of each culture, everybody has embraced.
Once we get to the point where all students are able to be equipped with all the equipment, and when we get parents, black or white, to really have a vested interest in the kid, that's when the whole educational system, I think, will improve.
School can't do it all. We've got to have a community thing. It takes a community to take care of a child, or to educate him, or do anything else that he has to have. It takes the whole community. So we've got to get big business and all of their expertise. And everybody got to get their heads together. We've got to get these children up where they belong.
What I really think needs to be done is that the whole concept of race, period, needs to be done away with. As long as we identify ourselves by race instead of just humans, period, I think you're always going to have problems.